The rain had been falling since before sunset, a relentless, chilling deluge. It wasn't a gentle summer sprinkle. This was the kind of cold, heavy downpour that seeped into your very bones, turning the city's sidewalks into shimmering, treacherous mirrors. Streetlights bled sickly yellow halos across the wet pavement, each passing car a phantom, throwing sheets of water up against the curb with a mournful hiss. G sat hunched in seat 12, his hood pulled low, a duffel bag tucked securely between his worn boots. It was the same seat as last night, a grim echo of a routine he no longer recognized. But the truth, a cold knot in his gut, was that nothing about tonight was routine. Not after her. Not after the name she'd whispered. A name that clawed at the edges of his memory, pulling him back into a past he desperately tried to bury. He told himself he wasn't here because she'd told him to be. No, he wasn't anyone's errand boy, especially not hers. Yet his mind wouldn't quiet, replaying the way she'd looked at him, the intensity in her eyes. And then, the name. Ray. The one person from his old life, a ghost he could never quite shake, a shadow that clung to him even in the brightest daylight. Ray, who had taken something so valuable it had drawn these shadows out of the dark. The bus growled along, its engine a deep, steady thrum that vibrated through the floorboards, a low, predatory purr. Only 5 other passengers tonight, each a silent, unsettling presence. A couple whispered in the back, their hushed tones adding to the eerie quiet. An old man slept by the window, his face a pale, unmoving mask. A kid with headphones hadn't looked up once, lost in a world G couldn't fathom, or perhaps simply trying to escape this one. The driver was the same as last night, a gaunt figure. But tonight he was quieter, almost unnervingly so. He hadn't even offered a nod when G boarded, his gaze fixed straight ahead, as if peering into an abyss only he could see. The air in the bus felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension, a premonition of something dark waiting just beyond the next stop. Every creak of the suspension, every splash of water against the windows seemed to amplify the growing sense of dread. Halfway through the route, the brakes hissed, a sudden, sharp exhalation of air. The door folded open with a mechanical sigh, revealing the rain-slicked street outside. A chill wind swept through the bus, carrying with it the scent of wet asphalt and something else, something metallic and cold. She stepped in. Same black dress, clinging to her form, now soaked and glistening. Same dripping hair, plastered to her face, framing eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets. But this time there was a slight, almost imperceptible limp in her step, a subtle vulnerability that made her even more unsettling. Her gaze swept the bus, a predator's instinct, finding him immediately. She walked straight down the aisle, her footsteps unnervingly silent on the rubber floor. "You came," she said, her voice a low murmur, almost a whisper, yet it carried an undeniable triumph. It was as if his presence confirmed some dark prophecy she had foreseen. "I didn't come for you," G muttered, his voice rough, a futile attempt to assert control over a situation that was rapidly spiraling. He felt a prickle of unease, a sense of being drawn into a web he couldn't see. Her eyes, dark and knowing, shifted subtly toward the back of the bus. 2 men in dark hoodies had gotten on behind her, their forms indistinct in the dim light, like shadows given substance. They were the same as last night, a chilling reminder of the danger that had stalked him. But tonight, there was a third, a new, more sinister presence. He sat at the very front, pretending to read a folded newspaper, his stillness more menacing than any overt threat. "They're here for you," she said, her voice low but sharp, cutting through the bus's hum. "And you're running out of time." The words hung in the air, a death knell. G smirked, a humorless twist of his lips. "Not my first time being hunted." He tried to project an air of indifference, but a cold dread was beginning to coil in his stomach. He'd faced danger before, but this felt different, more insidious. "You think they're just street muscle?" she scoffed, a hint of disdain in her tone. "They're not. They're cleaners. They don't leave messes. They don't leave witnesses." Her words were delivered with a chilling certainty, painting a grim picture of their efficiency. "Then why are you still breathing?" G challenged, his gaze unwavering, searching for a crack in her composure. He needed answers, a reason for her involvement, for her strange protection. She didn't blink, her eyes like polished obsidian. "Because I'm useful. You? You're not. Not yet." The implication hung heavy in the air. His usefulness was yet to be determined, and his life hung in the balance. The bus jolted violently over a pothole, a sudden lurch that sent a shiver through G. One of the men from the back, a hulking figure, stood and began making his way down the aisle, his movements slow, deliberate, like a predator closing in. G kept his eyes fixed on the rain-streaked window, pretending indifference, but his right hand slipped instinctively into his hoodie pocket, fingers closing around the familiar cold steel of the folding knife he always carried. It was a small comfort, a sliver of defiance against the encroaching darkness. The man passed, his shadow falling over G for a fleeting moment, and then kept going, stepping off at the next stop. A brief, almost imperceptible wave of relief washed over G, quickly replaced by a fresh surge of dread. Relief was short-lived, a cruel trick of the mind. The guy at the front, the one with the newspaper, slowly folded it, revealing hands encased in sleek, dark leather gloves. His eyes, cold and unblinking, locked on to G. He stood, a silent, imposing figure, radiating an aura of controlled menace. Before he could take a single step, the woman stood, her movement fluid and decisive, blocking the aisle between G and the gloved man. Her presence was a sudden, unexpected barrier, a defiance that surprised G. "You touch him here, you answer to me," she said, her voice low but laced with an undeniable steel, a warning that resonated through the quiet bus. The man froze, his gaze flickering between her and G, a silent battle of wills playing out in the confined space. The driver's voice, flat and devoid of emotion, cut in, announcing the next stop. The woman turned to G, her eyes urgent. "When these doors open, go. If you stay, you won't make it to the end of the line." Her words were a stark ultimatum, a final, desperate plea. G stayed put, a stubborn defiance hardening his jaw. He wasn't used to taking orders, especially not from someone who seemed to know more about his life than he did. She stared at him for a beat, a flicker of something akin to disappointment in her eyes, then stepped off into the relentless rain. One of the hoodie men, a silent sentinel, followed her, melting into the shadows. The glove-wearing man, his face unreadable, sat back down, his gaze still fixed on G, a silent promise of what was to come. The bus rolled on, its engine a low, mournful hum, carrying G deeper into the unknown. 5 minutes later, a cold dread began to creep over G. Something was profoundly wrong. The streets outside weren't familiar. The bus was clearly off route, veering into an unfamiliar, desolate part of the city. He stood, a sudden urgency propelling him forward, and walked to the front, his eyes scanning the desolate landscape outside. "Hey," he said to the driver, his voice sharper than he intended. "You missed my stop." The driver didn't answer, his silence more chilling than any words. G noticed his knuckles were white on the wheel, strained and rigid. His eyes, fixed straight ahead, didn't blink, a vacant stare that sent a shiver down G's spine. And then he saw it, barely visible beneath the seat, a small black device blinking red, a malevolent, pulsing eye. Not a bomb, he realized with a jolt of understanding. A tracker. A silent, insidious leash. G stepped back slowly, his eyes sweeping the bus, a growing sense of isolation washing over him. The couple in the back were gone. vanished without a trace. The kid with headphones was gone too, his seat empty, a silent testament to their disappearance. Only the glove-wearing man remained, sitting 3 rows away, watching him, a silent, predatory presence. The bus had become a cage, and he was the only prey left. At the next intersection, G yanked the cord, the sudden jolt of the bus's stop a jarring sound in the oppressive silence. He stepped off into the rain. The cold drops a shock against his skin, a desperate escape into the unknown. The bus pulled away, its red tail lights fading into the downpour, leaving him alone in the desolate street. He didn't make it halfway down the block before she emerged from the shadows, her hair plastered to her face, her presence as inevitable as the rain. She was a specter, always appearing when he least expected her, always with a new layer of mystery. "You're predictable," she said, her voice a low, knowing murmur. "And you talk too much," he replied, his voice laced with a weary frustration. She stepped closer, her eyes intense, reflecting the dim streetlights. "Ray took something worth dying for. They think you have it, and if they can't find it, they'll settle for you." Her words were a chilling confirmation of his worst fears, a glimpse into the true stakes of this deadly game. "I don't have anything," G insisted, his voice tight with desperation. He genuinely didn't know what she was talking about, what it was. "Then why are they still following you?" she countered, her gaze piercing, leaving no room for doubt. Headlights swept across them, a sudden blinding glare. A black sedan, sleek and ominous, rolled to a stop at the alley's mouth, its engine a low growl. 3 figures stepped out, their forms silhouetted against the car's lights, shadows stretching long and distorted against the brick wall. They moved with a silent, practiced efficiency, like hunters closing in on their prey. The woman stepped back, her face unreadable in the shifting light. "Last chance, G. Come with me." Her voice was a final, desperate plea, an offer of salvation he couldn't quite trust. He didn't move, his feet rooted to the spot, a stubborn defiance warring with the primal urge to flee. She sighed, a sound of profound disappointment, almost regret, and then, as silently as she had appeared, she slipped away into the dark, swallowed by the rain and the shadows, leaving him utterly alone. The figures closed in, their footsteps barely audible on the wet pavement. One reached into his jacket, a glint of metal catching the light. G tightened his grip on the knife in his pocket, his knuckles white, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The rain got heavier, a cold, relentless curtain falling around him. In the distorted reflection of a puddle at his feet, G saw them fan out, blocking every exit, every avenue of escape. He'd been here before, countless times, in different cities, with different faces, but the same cold, suffocating feeling in his gut. No way out. The first man lunged, a blur of motion in the driving rain. The bus roared past at the end of the block, its headlights flashing across the alley like a ghost from another life, a fleeting glimpse of a world he was rapidly leaving behind. And then everything went black. If you made it this far, if the shadows have drawn you in, then like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because not every story gets a happy ending, and some mysteries are meant to linger, haunting the edges of your mind long after the final page. Join us and unravel the threads of the unknown.